Much has been said until now about the way to moksha, about the way out of bondage. Discrimination between the real and the unreal, dispassion for the world, longing for liberation, freedom, faith in the words of the illumined, devotion to one's chosen ideal, practice of concentration and meditation, and so on and so forth. In our last class, we saw Sri Shankaracharya also emphasizing enquiry. Enquiry into the inner meaning of the teaching of Vedanta. What is it? What is the main teaching of Advaita Vedanta? Brahman alone is real and the world is ultimately unreal. And the individual soul is essentially identical with Brahman. This is the main teaching of Advaita Vedanta. So the seeker has to first convince oneself of this truth by means of deep enquiry and reflection. And then one has to establish oneself firmly in the practice of the other disciplines. To be firmly established means to be exclusively devoted to the practice of Vedanta. Exclusively, to the exclusion of all other occupations. It is only this kind of intense, one-pointed concentration that can give the mind the power to penetrate through the thick veil of ignorance and uncover the truth behind. This is what the Guru said in the last verse, the 46th. He said, "These disciplines are declared by the Upanishads to be the aspirant's direct means of liberation. Whoever abides in these is liberated from the bondage of the body which is caused by ignorance." So today we begin with the verse 47. In this verse also the Sadguru repeats the same idea. Ajnana yogat paramatmanastava hyanatma bandhas tata eva samsritihi tayor vivekodita bodhavahnir ajnana karyam pradahet samulam. Ajnana yogat paramatmanastava hyanatma bandhas tata eva samsritihi tayor vivekodita bodhavahnir ajnana karyam pradahet samulam. It is only through association with ignorance that you, who are the Supreme Self, find yourself under the bondage of the Not-Self. This is the sole cause of the cycle of births and deaths. The fire of enlightenment, kindled by discrimination between the two, burns up the effects of ignorance together with their root. I repeat, it is only through association with ignorance that you, who are the Supreme Self, find yourself under the bondage of the Not-Self. This is the sole cause of the cycle of births and deaths. The fire of enlightenment, kindled by discrimination between the two, burns up the effects of ignorance together with their root. The Guru says, "You are none other than the Supreme Brahman, pure consciousness itself. But because of your association with ajnana, ignorance, you mistakenly identify yourself with this psychophysical complex, which is anatma, matter, and you have become attached to it. It is this bandha, attachment to the body, mind, ego, the gross, subtle and causal bodies. It is attachment to these that gives rise to samsriti, transmigratory existence with all its dualities, good and evil, joy and sorrow, life and death. So it is basically only a case of mistaken identity. That is what it is. You wrongly imagine yourself to be the body, mind, ego, and attach yourself to everything that is related to them, not to you. But in reality, you are none other than the Supreme Brahman itself. So fear not. For you, there is actually no danger. You only imagine that you are in danger. There is a way of burning down this tree of worldly existence. That was the Guru's assurance. What is that? The Bodhavahni, the fire of enlightenment, that is Tayor Vivekodita, that is kindled, in fact, that is kindled by discrimination between the self and the not self. That Pradahet burns up. Burns up what? Ajnana karyam, the effects of ignorance. That is, identification not only with the body, but also identification with the world that is related to the body. In other words, identification with samsara that is characterized by birth, suffering, and death. And that is pradahet, that is burnt up, samulam, together with a root, that is together with ignorance itself, because ignorance is the cause of attachment to samsara. So with the power of discrimination between the self and the not self, it is possible to completely destroy identification with and attachment to samsara together with its cause, ignorance. When the cause itself is eliminated, there is no question of the effects reappearing. The effects were fear and sorrow. So when ajnana is removed, then dukkha and bhaya also disappear. Let's quickly go through it once again. I feel that I am caught up in this terrible samsara and I suffer very badly from it. What is the cause of this samsara? The cause is my own identification with the body, mind, ego, with the anatma, and my attachment to all that is connected with them. What is the cause of this false identification or attachment? Ignorance. Forgetfulness of my true nature. And how do I get rid of that? Get rid of that ignorance with the help of knowledge. Knowledge of my identity with the pure Brahman. And how do I attain that knowledge? That I am pure consciousness and not the body-mind complex? By discernment, by separating the self from the not self. This, in brief, is the instruction. So it is clear that jnana, which as we saw is the result of Vedanta vichara or enquiry, jnana is instrumental in destroying the sorrows of samsara, which amounts to saying that bondage is the effect, the result of ignorance, and can only be destroyed by knowledge and not by any other means. So, ajnana yogat paramatmanastava hyanatma bandhastata eva samsriti tayor vivekodita bodhavahnir ajnana karyam pradahet samulam. It is only through association with ignorance that you, who are the Supreme Self, find yourself under the bondage of the not-self. This is the sole cause of the cycle of births and deaths. But the fire of enlightenment, kindled by discrimination between the two, burns up the effects of ignorance together with their root. So now, the disciple has heard a good deal about spiritual life and the practice of Vedanta, spiritual life in general and Vedanta practice in particular. Let us remember, he is a qualified seeker after truth, burning with a longing for liberation. But he also has some burning questions, questions that trouble all such serious truth seekers. Now that he has found an illumined master who has accepted him as a disciple, he wants to ask those questions and hear the master's answers. Still, however keenly the disciple may be feeling the problem of bondage, however urgently he may be seeking release from it, the way he approaches the master for help, that is what we need to notice. That is something remarkable. The disciple, in spite of the urgency with which he feels the problem of samsara, he is full of reverence, humility, and faith. And we see it in how he addresses the master. Shishya uvacha, the disciple says, Kripaya shruyatam swamin prashnoyam kriyate maya yaduttaramaham shrutva kritarthasyam bhavan mukhat. Kripaya shruyata swamin prashnoyam kriyate maya yaduttaramaham shrutva kritarthasyam bhavan mukhat. The disciple says, kindly listen, O Master, to the questions I am about to ask. I shall feel blessed to hear an answer from your lips. Some time ago, when we were studying verse 34, we read, Tamaradhya gurum bhaktya prahva prashraya sevanaihi prasannam tamanuprapya prichhe jnatavyam. I hope you remember the verse. Worshipping such a master with devotion, approaching him when he is pleased with prostration, humility and service, one should ask him whatever there is to be known about the Atman. So the disciple goes to the master with a worshipful attitude, with an attitude of genuine devotion and faith. Sri Krishna also says the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita. How does one gain the knowledge of Brahman? Learn it by prostration, by enquiry, and by service. The wise who have seen the truth will teach you that knowledge. So the disciple's attitude should be worshipful, full of devotion and faith. This is how one should approach, this is how one should address the great masters. Instruction should be asked for meekly. Meekly means in a patient, quiet manner. We can't demand anything from them. We can only try to be worthy of receiving what they can give us. Not only the great masters, even lesser teachers will teach us more readily and we will be able to learn much if we approach them with respect. In the case of an illumined teacher, our devotion is not only to the person, but also to the wisdom that flows through the person. The Sadguru is the channel through which divine grace, through which the knowledge of God flows down to us. This we should never forget. So the disciple says, Kripaya shruyatam swamin, condescend to listen. He ablasen zuzuhören, O Master. It is said that one should never be abrupt, sudden in one's actions or speech in the presence of a holy person, whether in asking questions or even in offering salutations. One shouldn't do these things all of a sudden. One should always make it a point to first humbly draw the holy person's attention and then offer one's salutations. That is how to invoke, abitten the Master's grace. Then ask questions. It is not a matter of formality. The mutual love that exists between master and disciple is too great for formalities. This we have already seen. Their love for one another is far greater, far deeper than the love that exists between father and son. But when the disciple sees in his master his savior, one who saves him, one who can save him from the terrible forest fire of samsara, then the disciple's reverence for that Savior will be as great as his love for him. That is the point. To this love and reverence, the Master responds with compassion, and that ensures the disciple's attainment of knowledge. Then the disciple says, Prashnoyam kriyate maya. I wish to ask you a question. Much like the Upanishadic rishis and also Krishna and Shankaracharya, they also encourage disciples to ask intelligent questions. That is why we see the Upanishads, the Gita, and this Vivekachudamani, they are all in the form of dialogues between the student and the teacher. It's not enough to be in the presence of an enlightened soul. Doubts can only be clarified when they are expressed. And also, questions are an indication of the student's eagerness to learn. That is also true. On the one side, we have the disciples with their doubts and questions, and on the other, we have the Master's answers, his solutions born of experience. When these two meet, then we have the clear light of knowledge. The disciple's mind wrestles with the Master's, so to say, and becomes stronger as a result. As Swami Vivekananda said, I fought my Master for 6 years, with the result that I know every inch of the way. So, enquiry and discussion are the very heart of satsanga. Now, what is the question about? In short, it is about everything the Guru said in the last verse. It's about the self and the not self, about bondage and liberation, about discrimination. It is actually 7 questions in one. But we'll come to that a little later in the next verse. Now the disciple says, Yaduttaramaham bhavanmukhat shrutva kritarthasyam. Hearing an answer from your lips, I will be blessed. The disciple is seeking answers to his burning questions, but he wants to hear the instruction directly from the mouth of the man he has accepted as his master. Remember, this is no ordinary spiritual aspirant, but a highly qualified truth seeker. He is extremely intelligent, deeply learned, knowledgeable in the scriptures, and highly skilled in the art of arguing in their favor, in upholding the view of the scriptures. That is how verse number 16 described him. He could have very well found the answers from his books or from within himself after a little reflection. Still, in spite of being so qualified, he wants to have his doubts solved by his guru. Why? Because he has found his guru to be the very embodiment. He has found his guru to be the personification of the teachings of Vedanta. The words that come from the mouth of such a soul come from direct personal experience of the truth, from God Himself, so to say. Only such words have the power to dispel doubts forever. The disciple is convinced of that. That is why he says, hearing an answer from your lips, I will be kritarthasyam, completely fulfilled. The word kritartha means one who has attained one's goal, one who has accomplished one's purpose. The disciple has no doubt that on hearing the instruction from his master, he will attain, not just know more about, but he will attain that gaining which nothing else remains to be gained, knowing which nothing else remains to be known. He has no doubt that he will attain what is called the Parama Purushartha, the supreme goal of human life, that is moksha. So, he will be fulfilled forever. So, Shishya Uvacha Kripaya Shruyatam Swamin Prashnoyam Kriyate Maya Yaduttaramaham Shrutva Kritarthasyam Bhavan Mukhat. Kindly listen, O Master, to the questions I am about to ask. I shall feel blessed to hear an answer from your lips. And now we come to the famous 7 questions of the Vivekachudamani. They are known as the Sapta Prashnaha, the 7 questions of the Vivekachudamani. As I said, the disciple has questions about everything the Guru said in verse 47. Questions that all serious truth seekers are confronted with. And the rest of the book, which is well over 500 verses, 532 verses to be precise, it is all, in fact, Shankaracharya's answers to these 7 fundamental questions. So, what we have studied until now are the basics of Advaita Vedanta practice. From now onwards, the book will detail the various steps towards self-realization. In the master and disciple dialogue that follows, we will see how the great Shankaracharya anticipates our doubts and questions and has the disciple express them. And we'll also see how he gives his own answers and explanations through the words of the master. And what we get in the end is the gist of the essential teachings of Advaita Vedanta. What we get in the end is a systematically laid out manual of Advaita Vedanta philosophy and practice. So now, the disciple asks, Ko nama bandha kathamesha agata katham pratisthasya katham vimoksha kosa vanatma paramah ka atma tayor viveka katham etaduchyatam. Ko nama bandha kathamesha agata katham pratisthasya katham vimoksha kosa vanatma paramah ka atma tayor viveka kathametaduchyatam. What indeed is bondage? How has it come about? How does it continue to exist? How is one freed from it? What is this non-self? And who is the Supreme Self? And how can one discriminate between the two? I repeat, what indeed is bondage? How has it come about? How does it continue to exist? How is one freed from it? What is the non-self and who is the Supreme Self? And how can one discriminate between the two? Please tell me about all these. Well, before anything else, I must first of all be aware of bondage. I must be aware that I am bound. Unless I know this much, even the first question of what bondage is, even that will not arise, not to speak of trying to free myself from bondage. But that much awareness is assumed, because otherwise I wouldn't have taken up the study of this book, Vivekachudamani, in the first place. And I wouldn't have come this far in my study. So, that much seriousness is taken for granted. Shankaracharya takes it for granted that I have at least that much sense to realize that I am a bound soul. Because it is only when I know that I am bound that I'll put my mind to the task of knowing what it is and of freeing myself from it. If I don't know even that much, the question of trying to free myself doesn't arise. It brings to mind Sri Ramakrishna's parable of 4 classes of human beings. He says, people can be divided into 4 classes. Those bound by the fetters of the world, 1. Those who seek after liberation, 2. Those who are liberated, 3. And those who are ever free, 4. Sri Ramakrishna says, among the ever free, we may count sages like Narada. Rishis like Narada live in this world for the good of others, to teach people spiritual truth. They are the ever free. Those in bondage are sunk in worldliness and are forgetful of God. Sri Ramakrishna says, not even by mistake do they think of God. That is to say, they don't even know that they are bound. Then the seekers after liberation, people like us, they want to free themselves from attachment to the world. Some of them succeed and others don't. Finally, the liberated souls, such as the sadhus and mahatmas, to use Sri Ramakrishna's words, they are not at all entangled in the world. Their minds are free from worldliness and they always meditate on God. Now we come to the parable. Sri Ramakrishna narrates this parable. Suppose a net has been cast into a lake to catch fish. Some fish are so clever that they are never caught in the net. They are like the ever free. But most of the fish are entangled in the net. Some of them try to free themselves from it, and they are like those who seek liberation. But as he said, not all the fish that struggle succeed. A rare few do jump out of the net. But most of the fish caught in the net can't escape, nor do they make any effort to get out. Sri Ramakrishna says, on the contrary, they burrow into the mud with the net in their mouths and lie there quietly thinking, we don't have to fear anymore, we are quite safe here. They feel snug in their ignorance. But the poor things don't know that the fishermen will drag them out next morning together with the net. Those who are bound to the world are like these fish, says Sri Ramakrishna. He then goes on to say a few more things about this class of people. You can read it for yourselves if you are interested. It occurs in the very first chapter of the Gospel, on the day of M's third visit to Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna's description is so graphic that the devotees who were with him, who were in his presence when he told this parable, they are forced to see the seriousness of the situation. At the end of it, M writes, there was deep silence in the room when the devotees were forced to see the seriousness of the situation. Anyhow, to return to what we were discussing, I must at least know that I am bound. Then comes the first question, ko nama bandha. What is this thing called bondage? What is its nature? Because unless I first know what bondage is, I won't know how to free myself from it. So an intelligent seeker after liberation, an intelligent sadhaka will first want to know the nature of bondage. Then the next task is to seek out the cause of it. Kathamesha agataha. How has it come about? What caused it? How did I get caught? Because if I understand the cause, I'll be better able to deal with the effect. If I understand how I got into a difficult situation, I'll be better able to figure out how to get out of it. So it is important to understand the cause of my problems so I can respond to them intelligently. But then, this problem of bondage in samsara, this is no ordinary problem. It's a most mysterious problem, something that is extremely difficult to solve. Not only do I not know how I got into it, I don't even know how long I've been in this condition. So the disciple wonders, Katham pratisthasya? How does it continue to exist? How long has it been there? And how long will it continue to be like this? Other problems come and go sooner or later, but not this. This problem will not go away even when I die. It won't go away even when the entire universe is dissolved at the end of the world cycle, at the end of the kalpa. Because the universe will re-emerge at the beginning of the next cycle, and I'll be reborn in it in this same condition of bondage, again and again. Sri Krishna also has said that in the 15th chapter of the Gita. This tree of cosmic existence is eternal. It rests on a continuous series of births and deaths without beginning and end. So what is it upon which this seemingly never-ending state of bondage is founded? Seemingly never-ending. It is not that it is endless. There is an end to it, but now it appears to be never-ending. So what sustains it for such a long period of time? Now, we have to understand the intention behind these questions properly. It's not the disciples intention to remain preoccupied with samsara and bandha. He wants to find a way out of them, to find a way to release, to moksha. We are not studying this book merely to derive some intellectual satisfaction. We are studying in order to learn from the book how we can fulfill the supreme purpose of human life. We are not here to become pandits. We are here as mumukshus. That is why I said it is as if Shankaracharya anticipates our doubts and questions and has the disciple express them. So we find the disciple asking the next question, Katham vimoksha? How is one freed from it? If this samsara really has no beginning and end, how is liberation from it possible? A very short answer is, samsara as a cosmic process. As a cosmic process, samsara may be beginningless and endless, but one can put an end to one's existence in it. One doesn't have to remain bound in it. One can free oneself. Vedanta says, liberation is not only possible, that is the true aim and purpose of human life. The laws of transmigration apply only to bound souls, those who identify themselves with their body, mind, and ego. It is they who are born again and again. But those in whom a higher consciousness has dawned, they become free from this false identification. They realize their true nature, that they are Nitya Shuddha Buddha Mukta Atma, that they are eternally pure, conscious, free spirit. They are freed from the cycle of births and deaths, and they become immortal. It is true that every individual, without exception, every individual has to pass through these cycles of births and deaths until the soul realizes its true nature as the Supreme Self. But that real self itself is neither born nor does it die. It is, as we read in the Gita, Ajo Nitya Shashvatoyam Purano, unborn, eternal, immortal, and primordial. As the Guru pointed out in the 47th verse, it is ignorance that creates the idea, the notion of bondage for the Atman. The Atman in itself is always free. This misidentification of the self with the not self has been there from beginningless time. And as long as it lasts, the Atman remains the little limited individual self, the ego. And this ego is born and dies repeatedly. Under the spell of ignorance, this individualized soul forgets its divine nature. Still, there comes a time in the career of every soul. By career, I mean the journey, the Vedagang of every soul, when it begins to feel something about its spiritual nature. This is bound to happen as a result of the experience that the soul gathers. The feeling that it is spiritual may be dim or vague at first, but sooner or later the soul wakes up from its ages-long slumber, and then begins the struggle to realize its real nature. And finally, with the dawn of higher consciousness, with the true spiritual awakening, when the soul becomes fully aware of its spiritual nature, aware of its inseparable connection with the Supreme Self, when that happens, all karmas fall off and the cycle of births and deaths comes to a stop. Then that soul realizes its freedom and says, like Swamiji did, my play is done. So the wheel of samsara continues to turn for other souls, but it has stopped for this individual soul. This is what it means when it is said that though samsara is eternal, liberation is possible. But at the same time, it must also be said that this ultimate achievement of human life is not easy. It doesn't happen just like that. Even after ages, it doesn't happen naturally. It takes tremendous effort and struggle to accomplish this. Nothing worthwhile is attained naturally or spontaneously without hard work. The question of how one is freed from bondage can be answered in another way. I just said, when the soul wakes up, the struggle begins. Swamiji says, Swami Vivekananda, the whole process of evolution is the Atman's struggle to manifest itself. It's a constant struggle against nature. It is the struggle against nature and not conformity to nature. I repeat, it is the struggle against nature and not conformity that constitutes human progress. That makes human beings what they are. Here, by the word nature, Swamiji doesn't mean external nature, not exploiting nature. What Swamiji has in mind is internal nature, the mind and the senses, which are products of nature and belong to nature. What he wants to say is, by drifting along the current of our thoughts and perceptions, we only become spiritually aimless and weak. This is what happens. If we want to reach the other shore of samsara, or better still, if we want to go back to the source, to regain our original nature, then we have to be strong. We have to swim powerfully against the current of our false, lower nature. So this is the other way of answering the question of how one is freed from bondage. Anyway, let's move on to the fifth question. Kosavanatma. What is this not self? In Vedanta, we have only two main categories, the self and the not self, the real and the unreal. The self, the real, is one. The not self, the unreal, is manifold, many. Everything other than the self, whether it is gross or subtle, everything belongs to the category of the not self, anatma. But what exactly is this not self? I said the not self is many, so it has to be matter, because if you give it some thought, in the final analysis, only pure consciousness, spirit, only that can be one homogeneous entity without a second. Everything other than that has to be matter. and therefore unconscious also, insentient I mean. The not self, the unreal, the unconscious, the insentient, the material, all mean the same thing. We say the not self is unreal, but we do see the unreal, we do perceive it. How can this happen? How can something that doesn't exist appear to exist? Nothing, no object or scene can appear without a basis. This basis is called foundation, support, substratum. This is how it is termed in Vedanta texts. The rope, which is real, is the support of the snake, which is unreal. The desert, which is real, is the foundation of the mirage, which is unreal. It's a strange phenomenon, but the unreal cannot make an appearance in the absence of the real, though that real is unseen. I repeat, the unreal cannot make an appearance in the absence of the real, though the real is unseen. We can't watch a movie without a screen. But at the same time, we can't perceive the unreal and the real both at the same time. If I see the snake, I don't see the rope. If I see the rope, I don't see the snake. If I see the world appearance, I don't see the reality underlying it. And if I see the underlying reality, I won't be aware of the world appearance. So the disciple's sixth question is, Paramah ka Atma, who is the Supreme Self? If you say this body, mind and ego is the not self, that it is fake, it is the fake I, then who or what is the self, is the real I? If this world that I perceive is only appearance, then what is reality? You said it is because of ignorance that I, who am the Supreme Self, find myself under the bondage of the not self. So please, explain to me, who am I really? And finally, the disciple asks one last question. You mentioned the fire of enlightenment kindled by discrimination between the self and the not self. Tayor viveka kathame taduchyatam. Please teach me how I can discriminate between them. How can I distinguish between the two? How do I tell the one from the other? It's a matter of common experience that we don't distinguish between the two. On the contrary, we superimpose the attributes of the one upon the other. In our ignorance, we confuse the self with the not self. We observe this confusion in every action, every thought of our daily life. This is I, this is mine. We identify the I, which is pure consciousness, with material things. And on account of the same confusion, we also associate the eternal self with the changeful body. We say, I was born, I have grown, I am ill, I will die. It has all become a curious mixture, like a mixture of sugar and sand, a handful of sugar in a bag full of sand. It is extremely difficult to separate the two. Extremely difficult. Only the seeker who is prepared to work patiently, diligently. Diligently means fleißig, sorgfältig, eifrig, only such a seeker will succeed. As Swami Ashokanandaji once said, it is not necessarily the worthy person who advances in spiritual life. It is the determined person. It is not necessarily the worthy person who advances. It is the determined person. That is something to keep in mind. Because that is how difficult the process of neti is. We may be intelligent, we may be clever, but we may not have the endurance. The seeker has to keep sifting and separating relentlessly, tirelessly. Not only when I am talking, not only when you are listening, but at all times. And this must go on until I am thoroughly convinced that I am not the body, mind, ego. The conviction must be just as strong as I am now convinced that I am the body, mind, and ego. The whole thing has to be reversed. The heart must become like a blast furnace where metal is separated from the ore constantly. So the practice of Advaita Vedanta is nothing but this sifting and separating, extracting the gold and leaving out the ore. The disciple already knows something about all this from his own study of Vedanta and from the Master's brief statement in verse number 47. He knows that he is really the Paramatman, that his association with the Anatman is only due to Ajnana. He knows that the fire of Viveka will destroy Ajnana. But this knowledge is still not completely free from doubts. So he wants to learn more about these things so that he can convert that knowledge into actual experience and realize the purpose of his life. So that is the intent behind this series of 7 questions. So, ko nama bandha kathamesha agatah, katham pratisthasya katham vimokshah, kosa vanatma paramah ka atma, tayor vivekah katham etaduchyatam. What is this bondage? How has it come about? How does it continue to exist? And how is one freed from it? What is the not-self and who is the Supreme Self? How can one discriminate between the two? Please tell me about all these.